introduce our next speaker for today's meeting. April Thompson is going to be talking about garden and landscape uses of biosolids. She is a Washington, D.C. based writer, gardener, foodie, and forager. Working as a freelance writer for more than 20 years, April has covered food, travel, sustainability, gardening, foraging, and other subjects for dozens of publications, including her ongoing column in Natural Awakenings magazine. She has taught workshops on wild edible plants, fighting food waste, and related topics for Knowledge Commons DC, Rooting DC, and other organizations. April is a founding member of the Bruce Monroe Community Garden, a member of the Mycological Association of Washington. I looked that one up. It's the study of fungi. Sorry, I should have known it. And an alum of the UDC Master Gardener Program. She currently serves as Director of Marketing and Sales for Bloom, which is a recycled biosolids fertilizer developed by DC Water at its Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant. We're looking forward to her presentation on garden and landscape uses of biosolids. Thank you, April.
So really appreciate the opportunity today to talk to you all about my work with Bloom and biosolids. I am pretty much a lifelong gardener, but I actually wasn't familiar with biosolids until I came to Bloom. And excited to kind of share with you a bit about what we do and how biosolids can be beneficial not only for the garden, but for the planet. Our Director of Resource Recovery at DC Water likes to say this: there's no such thing as waste, only wasted resources. I think we're all familiar with that in the context of compost, where we're recycling food scraps, leaves, garden debris, for beneficial use in the garden. And biosolids are essentially the same thing. If you haven't heard the term before, it's essentially the nutrient-rich material that is extracted from the wastewater. And in our case, used as a soil conditioner and fertilizer. I think it's worth pointing out that currently across the states, only about a half of biosolids are actually used for what we call beneficial reuse, which is land applying to farms and gardens and so forth. There's still something like a third of all biosolids in the country that are either landfilled or incinerated. And this is, important precious nutrients and organic matter that's essentially going to waste instead of reuse. I'd also like to point out that not all biosolids are created equal. I'll go into this in a little more detail, but there are different processes and different quality of material, ours being kind of the highest designation that the EPA offers, which is Class A, exceptional quality. So sometimes people are familiar with the term or with a type of biosolids, but there are kind of different grades, so to speak. One of the biosolids product that's probably the most familiar to people is Milorganite, which has been produced by the city of Milwaukee for over 100 years. So that's something you can find in Home Depots and stores across the country. So here is our lovely Blue Plains facility. And so DC Water was the first to put in what's referred to as thermal hydrolysis system. This is called a Canby system. It's developed, it's technology that was developed in Norway. We had the first in North America, and we currently have the largest in the world of this particular combination of technology, which is anaerobic digestion and thermal hydrolysis, which I'll go into briefly in a few minutes. But essentially, this has allowed us to drastically reduce the quantity of material that comes out of Blue Plains, cut our greenhouse gas emissions dramatically, and develop renewable power in addition to creating this great product, Bloom. I'll talk about a lot more. So this started operating in 2014 and has really enabled the authority to save millions of dollars annually. And once COVID is the restrictions have been lifted, we will be offering tours of Blue Plains again. And I know Stephen and I have talked for a while about doing something for his students and for the Master Gardeners. So hopefully we'll be able to show you this in person in the very near future. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of this process schematic, but just want to kind of highlight again that there are different ways to process biosolids. This center schematic here, where you see the anaerobic digestion, this is the process that we now have, and essentially the material goes through the initial first steps of screening and so forth. Oops. But it's this middle step where we have the anaerobic digestion and thermohydrolysis that's a little bit different. In the past, it was dewatered. Lime was added to stabilize the material, and then it was loaded out as what's called Class B material. Whereas with the Canby system, it goes through these interim steps that essentially, oops, sorry, I don't know why that keeps going back. Essentially, pressure cooks the material to basically kill all potential pathogens, and then it is reseeded with microbes that essentially eat the excess carbon and release methane that we're able to capture and use that to fuel the plant. So Blue Plains is actually the largest green energy project in DC because of the system that we've put in place. And that essentially, I mean, there's nothing excess that goes back to the grid, but we're able to fuel about 1/3 of the energy needs of the plant with that process. Okay, so in terms of the benefits, again, we're producing over 40,000 tons of bloom. I'm sorry, able to sell over 40,000 tons of bloom. There's much more that's produced than we're currently selling, but that's kind of a record. The old model was we would pay farmers to use this material, and we've really been able to turn this equation on its head by finding a good market for this. And I'll go into more detail about the different products that we've created for different segments. But essentially, we've again been able to improve the quality of material coming off the belts, generate power, cut our greenhouse gas emissions dramatically. We've actually reduced our carbon footprint by over 41%, and again, saved millions of dollars, which in turn translates to abating potential rate increases for DC Water customers, including myself. So. But what's in it for you all as gardeners? Lots of things. I like to call bloom and biosolids sort of a multivitamin for the soil, because you are getting the good organic matter that does a whole host of things, from providing food for the soil microbes, helping with erosion resistance and water holding capacity. It increases the ability to retain nutrients, reduce soil compaction, and improve soil structure. We also have robust macro and micronutrients that are available in slow release forms. So your soil, it's being released at a rate that your plants can take up, as opposed to a chemical fertilizer that's kind of a quick hit. And that includes nitrogen, iron for leafy green growth. We also have drought resistance properties I'll go into a little more later. We actually have research on this that helps with the root and shoot growth. And then increasing the beneficial microbe population, in part by providing those the carbon that they need to sustain themselves. So we do have an ongoing research program. There's a budget provided annually to collaborate with different research institutions, including the University of Maryland. And so we've, over the years, done lots of different research to show the efficacy, the safety, and other aspects of our product in different applications, from poor roadside soils to wetland restoration. And we do have a lot of information available on our website. We've got some summaries of the research, and then we link to the more in-depth studies if anyone's interested. Our website is bloomsoil.com, as you see at the bottom there. So this is just an example of one of the research studies that we've done, kind of showing how bloom is beneficial for water management and plant growth. So you see this research was done both with clay and sand, and looking at how it affected water holding capacity, hydraulic conductivity, or how the water circulates. And you can see a significant increase, particularly for the water holding capacity and hydraulic conductivity, as well as also the above ground leaf biomass. So I mentioned earlier drought resistance. And by the way, this is a picture of a home gardener that's used bloom in their gardens. So we've heard for a long time anecdotally farmers reporting that their crops have done better during drought years using bloom. And sort of the conventional wisdom was that the organic matter held more water, in the soil and helped the crops in sort of times of drought. But kind of looking at the math is like there's still a considerable difference that you wouldn't necessarily expect from organic matter alone. And researchers at Virginia Tech found that while removing the nitrogen from the effluent at Blue Plains, which is essentially done to ensure that it doesn't go into the Chesapeake Bay, the microbes secrete essential plant hormones such as cytokinins that, along with the nitrogen, end up in the solids. And these are compounds, naturally occurring substances that help them get through stressful conditions. And so that was kind of helping them get through these droughts. So Mother Nature at work. So I've been talking about Bloom. Bloom is our overarching product name, but we actually have a suite of products under that trademark that I'll take you through right now. Our products are currently available in DC. Oh, that should be Maryland, not Massachusetts. Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So I'll start with what we call our fresh bloom, which is mainly used for farms, construction, and then also blenders that will take our material and then do value-added products, including some of the same recipes that we use at the plant. And we essentially sell about 3/4 of the raw product, the processed product, but raw meaning not with value-added other ingredients added, to farmers, particularly in Maryland. Here you see, this was actually just taken this season, sort of a record corn yield from this farmer at Vista View Farms. We work with a lot of farmers that are wanting to improve their soils naturally, but also, of course, they want to see some results. And this was a case where he saw, better yields than he had with anything else that he had used. So this fresh bloom, as I call it, is essentially what comes straight off the belts after dewatering. It's kind of got a sticky consistency that, farmers are used to working with, especially those that are used to using animal manure or chicken litter, but not necessarily easy for a home gardener to incorporate. So we have created a couple of blend products that are available in Maryland that are just make it a little bit more workable for home gardeners. And those are registered as soil conditioners as opposed to the the pure fresh bloom, which is a fertilizer, as that has just a higher nutrient content. So these pictures here, this is actually at Blue Plains. We have our own little blending facility. The material, which I'll talk about the recipes of our blends, just goes through this Royer machine and then gets sort of stored under this little roof area here on the left, and is mainly gone out via third-party trucking. We'll have homeowners and commercial landscapers and so forth that will order from us, and we will schedule deliveries of that straight from Blue Plains. We also have on the left, you'll see there a greenhouse where we do allow some community gardens to outgrow plants for their gardens, and then we also do our own plants and things like that for giveaways. And there are bees also. We work with the DC Beekeeper Association, and you can't see that there, but behind the wall there, we do have bees too that are kept at Blue Plains. So we've got two main blends. The first being what we call our woody blends. And this is really the closest approximation for compost. It has a high organic matter content. And typically, we're seeing people incorporate this into garden beds, sometimes also used for top dressing. But it's just kind of a good all-purpose blend to enrich soils. We're currently working with some resellers. I think do have this around here from Montgomery County. Ten Oaks Nursery would be one of the few places that you could get this in bulk. You can also get it directly from us, but they do resell from that nursery. So we have customers kind of all across the board in terms of who's using it. But for this particular blend, Architect of the Capitol that maintains the Capitol grounds uses this. The American Horticulture Society was also using that at River Farm. That River Farm is in Flex, if anyone's familiar with that property. But that beautiful photo on the right there was from one of their garden beds. So then we also have what we call our Sandy blend, which is a similar recipe. The woody blend is basically the fresh bloom with aged hardwood pines. And in this blend, we've got sand added as well. This is really great for top dressing, particularly for top dressing lawns. And in our research, it's outperforms the alternatives, both the other blend that we have, as well as some of the alternative composts. That was in a University of Maryland study that was done with the Maryland State Highway Authority. So we see this a lot with particularly our turf customers. Catholic University uses this on particularly areas that get a lot of foot traffic. And also George Washington's Mount Vernon has used this as well. So our last product is what we call our cured bloom. This is currently only available in bag, but can be found in Ace hardware stores, including, let's see, there are a few in Montgomery County, the Tacoma Ace and the Silver Spring Ace hardwares in 50-pound bag. And this is essentially the pure fresh bloom that's air dried to consistency almost of potting soil in a concentrated product that is registered, as I said, as a fertilizer. The guaranteed nutrient content is a 1.5 nitrogen, but it's often a bit higher than that. And you're getting a lot of great organic matter. I thought it's above 50% organic matter. If anyone's familiar with Homestead Gardens, they also sell that in bulk. They buy our fresh material. They do their own processing of it. Essentially, as I said, it's just laying this material out in windrow piles where it gets aerated and then dried to consistency that's further stabilized. So that's another place where you can get that both in bulk and in bag. So I know many of you probably use Leaf Grow. This slide just kind of compares our products to Leaf Grow. So you see kind of across the board, we do have a higher nutrient content, and organic matter kind of depends on the on our product versus their products. Leaf Grow is the regular Leaf Grow is the leaf product. Leaf Grow Gold is their product that's produced from food waste. So I mentioned earlier, we're really growing in just about everything, from farm use, hay, hemp, hops. We recently had a couple of hemp farmers that started using the material this year. Ornamentals, from cut flowers to roses and trees. It's used in school gardens and landscaping, golf courses, and then things like even grapevines and so forth. That wine at the top there was actually a DC Water employee who lives in Virginia and makes his own wine and grows an array of Indian vegetables using bloom. So that wine was actually produced with bloom assisted grapes, let's say. And as mentioned, community gardens. And I still am a member of the Bruce Monroe Community Garden that's right in the heart of DC. I'm in the Parkview neighborhood. I use it on my beds, and there are a lot of community gardens that continue to use it. This was part of the initial, outreach and uptake of Bloom, was kind of getting this out free to community gardens so that they could see how it worked. And while we're not providing it for free to community gardens, we do have a smaller truck that we can get out as little as a couple of yards within the area for a pretty reasonable cost. It's also been used on street tree planting. DDOT and KC Trees had a collaboration year before last where they were using this to essentially backfill trees for tree planting. And while I know many of you are, working in, school and community gardens and so forth, it is also really great for lawns. So if it's something you want to try on your own lawn, highly recommend our sandy blends. We've seen, really high germination rates and also kind of quick green ups with this. And one of the benefits is that it being a slow release product, you're going to see benefits not just the first season, but the subsequent seasons. The mineralization rate is something like 30%. So if you're putting it down in the fall, you'll see some results now, but then you also kind of the nutrients are slowly being released in a way that come spring, the nutrients that the plant and the grass need are there for the taking. This was an example of a athletic school field rehab that was done in in Capitol Hill area of DC. And again, particularly for areas with a lot of foot traffic, it's really great for those kind of patchy areas. In this case, it was just kind of raked in over the existing grounds, but also can be used in establishment of turf as well. We've got sports fields, college campuses, just kind of a wide array of turf customers using this. Including, for example, on the left here, this is this mega mansion that one of our commercial landscaper customers used on this Leesburg, Virginia turf area. And there on the right, you see some of the gardens at Tudor Place, if you're familiar with that. The roses there are heirloom roses from Martha Washington, and those were assisted with bloom. So just to give you an idea of application rates, because sometimes people are used to using a particular product and may under or over apply. It is going to depend on which product you're using. Our cured bloom being a higher nutrient content. So for that, we're recommending incorporation rate of, more like something like 15%, or, an inch, half inch to an inch to 6 to 12 inches of soil. So you want to kind of incorporate that down to where it's getting in the root zone where the plants need the nutrients. Whereas with the blends, which have a lower nutrient content, you can use up to 30%. And again, we're recommending you get down to 6 to 12 inches. If you're using this to top dress, we recommend something like a 1/4 inch. And then you're going to have to, of course, water that so that it does get down into the root zone. Before I restart that, this is just a quick video I did with Kathy Jentz of Washington Gardener magazine, who was incorporating the cured product into a raised garden bed. So I'm just gonna let that play, hopefully. So that was an example of how it could be incorporated. Everyone has different methods, and I haven't done that layering method, but that apparently worked well because we heard back from her later this season that she had some great zucchini growing in that bed. So it's a great great product to use in raised beds as well. So that is all that I had for you guys, but I am looking forward to having a nice Q&A session so I can hear a little more about what you guys are using as soil amendments and any questions you may have.
Okay, April, thank you. We do have some questions that have been posted here. Let me just go back to them real quick. So the first question we had, you did post something about the difference between bloom and leaf grow, but we had someone asking a question, the difference in the general composition between bloom products and, I hope I say this right, Milorganite. Mm-hmm. They read the comparisons of leaf grow, but didn't find anything online with the comparison to the Milorganite.
Yeah, great question. So the composition in terms of what the material itself is essentially the same. They have a different process there, but the sort of the ratio of nutrients is going to be similar. What is different is the end processing of Milorganite goes through a heat drying, and so it is a more concentrated product. I believe theirs is either a 5, I think they have like maybe 5% nitrogen or 6% nitrogen. And that is simply because it has less water. So that is going to be a more concentrated product. They've been experiencing shortages in some of the home and lawn landscaping garden centers that we've been able to pick up as customers. It's been during those times of shortage because some people have gotten used to that as a go-to product for their lawns. So you're going to use it similarly, but maybe at a slightly higher ratio in terms of how much you're going to incorporate.
Okay, thank you. The next question we had was about chemical contaminants, and what about non-living molecules like pharmaceuticals? Another person commented, with so many people taking meds, how are those mitigated, or do you not use this on food crops?
Another great question that comes up a lot. The short answer is there are infinitesimal amounts of those pharmaceutical compounds in the biosolids, but at a it's at a orders of magnitude less than in many other things, including toothpaste and other things like triclosan, for example, that studies have shown it's at a level that is safe for human health. You would have to, for example, with some of the metals, which that's another thing that comes up, you would have to be eating biosolids, a plate of biosolids every day to kind of get to a pharmaceutical dose of this. And so ideally these things would not be coming downstream into the wastewater, but the cost of removing these very small amounts of these things would result in extraordinary rates for people's water bills that it's just not economical to do. So yes, they're there, but there's sort of a difference between presence and there actually being enough to be of concern for human health, and also the pathway for exposure, given that this is not something that people are going to be actually eating. Although my cat, when I have it out in the house, she'll nip into it, and it's again not something that that has been deemed of concern. People have been using actually biosolids for centuries.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. The next question we had was, are Montgomery County gardeners allowed to use Bloom even if their gardens don't have a demonstrated need for nitrogen?
That's an excellent question. In terms of being allowed, I'm not exactly sure what the county regulations on that are. I've yet to encounter a soil test that showed that the soil already had everything that it needed. So obviously you're always going to want to do your soil testing and see what may be needed. The fact that we are such a slow release product, and particularly with the blends, there is nitrogen, but it's a relatively small amount compared to say a chemical product. Often, folks are using it for the organic matter first and foremost, which most soils, I would say, are pretty low in. So yeah, I'd say maybe someone else can chime in terms of the actual regulations around nitrogen in Montgomery County. But I'd say it always comes back to your soil test and what it looks like it needs.
Hi, April. It's Steve. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the question is more related to phosphorus in lawns, and yes, that's regulated. But so that's where it was kind of steered. But that's just
Gotcha.
specifically to lawns, and it's only, you're not allowed to apply phosphorus to lawns if it tests high or adequate. If it's at lower levels, and I can get into the details of that, but that's where it was going.
Okay.
That's where it's going. Just give me some
Gotcha.
reference, April. Thank you.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, the phosphorus question is complicated. Something like only 1% of the phosphorus in Bloom is actually water soluble and plant available. And what is again, it is very slowly released. And so there really aren't those distinctions made, particularly in what we have to put on the label. We're actually working to change that with the labeling so that is a little bit more clear to consumers. I can send you more literature on that particular question, but the phosphorus that is in Bloom is pretty well not available to plants.
Okay, that was the next comment, was about the phosphorus and reconciling the use of it in areas with runoff. But I think you've addressed that. The next one is, let's see, I'm moving down the chat here. Which products can homeowners order bulk or palleted bags directly from Blue Plains?
Yeah, all of our products. We do kind of have a minimum of a couple of yards for the blended material. But yeah, we're able to supply all of those. We do not supply individual bags that you have to buy at retail. And with the pallets of the cured bloom that we sell, it's kind of challenging for most homeowners because, you know, just to even offload an entire pallet without having a forklift like our commercial customers have. But in principle, that is possible.
Okay. A question about whether did Mount Vernon, the Architect of the Capitol, and AHS pay for the bloom, or as a commercial transaction, or was it donated to them?
Absolutely commercial. Yeah, they were paying full fare.
Okay.
We do, you know, we do have, we will on occasion donate material. And by the way, I am not a direct employee of DC Water. DC Water set up a nonprofit LLC called Blue Drop that essentially is set up to help abate future rate increases of DC Water ratepayers by, you know, alternative revenue streams such as Bloom. We also do event rentals of our beautiful LEED certified building in DC. But as such, you know, we try to hold a line in terms of the cost of material, and we're often subsidizing the actual delivery cost that we have to pay to the third party trucking companies and so forth. But we do have some, you know, in some cases we will donate material. There's an entity in Maryland called Farming for Hunger that grows food for food banks in Maryland, and they've had great results with Bloom. We donate the fresh material to them. The Capital Area Food Bank in DC also, we've supplied free material to them.
Okay. Let's see. A question about Bloom's given their Bloom's high iron content, could be interesting in inhibiting certain lawn weeds like Creeping Charlie. Have you studied any impact of nitrogen on weeds?
That's an interesting question, and I never thought about that. When people ask us about weed suppression, we say, you know, Bloom is equal opportunity in terms of growing, so it's, you know, it's going to grow the weeds alongside your, you know, other things potentially. Although you can sort of use it also as kind of a little bit of a mulch layer as well if you're top dressing. But that's a good question to take back to the team. You know, we're always, as I said, looking at new research questions. And man, if we could find that it helps suppress weeds, then that would be another added value.
Absolutely. Is there any concern about the accumulation of heavy metals with repeat applications?
Again, and I should have a slide about this because I do have some visuals that just sort of show just how, I mean, it's the level of these compounds are so low that until recently they weren't even detectable. It's only with sort of more sophisticated testing methods that we've actually been able to test for that. And these are things, the pharmaceuticals are not, that's not something that is regulated by the EPA in terms of biosolids levels. We monitor that ourselves. Metals are part of the monthly testing that we send to the EPA, and we are far below what their highest standard is. And so, I mean, even if you were to do the math to extrapolate over 100 years of application, you know, you're still not going to see a level that would be concerning.
Okay. Back a little bit again on the phosphorus comment. It says in Montgomery County, we're not allowed to apply phosphorus on lawns. So technically we could not use sandy blend on our lawns. And another comment was the problem with phosphorus is the runoff, not availability to plants. Any comments?
Yeah, I defer to to Stephen in terms of the lawn application on that. We're a registered product in Maryland, and it is, I guess, the burden is on the consumer to be applying it in a proper manner. When we're dealing with farms where it's often of greater concern, they are working with nutrient management planners to ensure that it is that is in compliance with regulations. And in those cases, they're often using it on hay ground, which is kind of a similar application, and they are able to do that under the letter of the law. Stephen, do you have any further thoughts on that to help me out here?
Oh, sure. We can go over this probably at a later time about fertilization and the care for lawns. We usually try to do that at least once a year because the laws in Montgomery County, they're changing, they're tweaking. And one of the things you mentioned, April, which was really interesting, is that when you get different organic products, they have different release rates for phosphorus. And I think we're trying to drill down to that point to kind of separate products which were really release the phosphorus very quickly to those, like you mentioned, that release it very, very slowly. By doing such, that allows you to use more types of organic, some types of organic products, which in the past, if you just looked at the total amount of phosphorus in there, you couldn't use it because you're going to exceed it. But is that really the case? Is it being really released at that rate? So we will have more on that area information. You brings up a really good point. And so, yeah, that they've been battling, kind of, not battling is maybe not the right word, with the laws in Montgomery County, whether we should tweak that or not. So, so I'll hopefully have more information on this.
Okay. Then our next question is, do the new stormwater drainage tunnels being built in DC affect your operation? Where are those?
Not really. I mean, I guess I don't know too much about those tunnels, but it, I mean, it hasn't affected our operations in terms of the the inflow.
Okay. One person congratulating you on the use of choosing words that make your product sound appealing, like bloom, blend, woody, cured, recipe. You have a good marketing person that created the vocabulary.
Thank you. Those things do matter, and sometimes we'll have people that will say, oh, do you have any bloom to do you have any product to get rid of, or it's like, no, we don't. We're not looking to get rid of this. This is a valuable resource that that you can purchase from us. And it was, I think, at the beginning, sort of a challenge that we didn't know if we were going to be able to overcome, sort of, particularly at the level of farmers, to really change this equation from where they were used to potentially getting paid to actually apply this to actually paying us to receive the material. And I think it speaks to the value and the results that people see, that we've been able to do that. And I think it really, it really helps to kind of create a positive spin. But at the end of the day, it's also about results. And I could talk all day about the sustainability and why this is great for the planet and needs to be where we're moving. But when we're dealing with commercial customers, like landscapers and retailers, they're worried about their bottom line. They want to know does this work? And is it going to be affordable in conjunction, vis-a-vis whatever the going alternative is? And so I lead with those things, and then the feel-good aspects of the sustainability come second.
Yeah, along those lines was a comment, is it hard to overcome people's possible reticence about using a product that comes from this source? And you sort of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of what we call the ick factor that can come in, but I think we've got sort of a enlightened area of consumers that we're dealing with, that more than ick is like cool, like this is. I mean, it's most people don't think about what happens after they flush and what happens to that material. As my fifth grade science teacher said, there is no such thing as a way. Everything goes somewhere, and this is a closed loop technology that really is cool. The technology aspect of it is, part of what makes it unique. But I also like to talk about it, like, when people are like, oh, that's that poop product or whatever. It's like, no, it was poop, just like the the apple that you ate and then pooped out, that poop is no longer an apple. It was transformed into something else, and then once it the poop goes down the drain, we again transform it into something different, that again goes to create that apple. So it's a literal circle, and I think that's kind of what's really cool about it.
Okay, let's see, a couple more here. Are there discounts for nonprofits or educational institutions?
So generally not, but we, on a case-by-case basis, can provide discounts. We do for commercial customers, we'll offer like some free sample material to check out. So if people are interested, my contact is there, and I'm happy to talk through whatever your project and budget is.
Okay. How are pathogens, bacteria, protozoa, viruses, helminthova mitigated before being sold?
Yeah, so in terms of those types of pathogens, that middle step, the CANBI system that I talked about, the thermal hydrolysis, the material is heated well beyond pasteurization, and so none of those types of organisms survive that process. And that's part of our monthly testing, and all of that test data is also available on our website.
Okay, and can you speak about the use of bloom and it says and poplar trees in the improvement of mine soils?
Yeah, I won't be able to go into detail on that one. That actually predated me. I believe that was in Stafford County, Virginia. Yeah, I would need to look up that research summary to provide more detail. I just know that it was a success in terms of the reclamation. We don't biosolids have been used elsewhere in reclamation projects, but that's not something that we've gotten approached with in the 2.5 years that I've been here. So again, that would be a good one for me to circle back to. And if there are any questions here that I'm not answering fully, and can circle back and send you guys an email that you can circulate with further information, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and just one final, I guess, when we were talking earlier about chemical contaminants, someone had specifically asked about, I guess, medications, and they wanted us to, I guess, make sure we answered that question. But specifically, the person was saying people take so many medications. How are these mitigated? But I thought you addressed that earlier.
Yeah, when I talked about pharmaceuticals and triclosan, for example, that was the example I gave. That is something that is actually at a higher concentration in your average toothpaste than you will find in which is going into your mouth than is in biosolids. So again, these are things that we unfortunately cannot remove, but monitor. And again, I can send some fact sheets that kind of contextualize like the levels vis-a-vis the, you know, the detection level is one thing. The potential harmful level for human health is sort of orders of magnitude way above anything that we have tested for.
Okay. So that someone just asked about fact sheets are there fact sheets in the Bloom website? And that's the last question we have, I guess.
Yeah, there are, but what I'd love to do if I can is just kind of put together just given the very good questions that we've had here, and we do have data, fact sheets, et cetera, that address a lot of these in more detail. I can put together an email with links or attachments to these just as references for everyone, and send that to you all as organizers to disseminate. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Great. That's all the questions we have. April, thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to either Steve or whoever's going to close the program.
It's going to be me. April, yeah, you send me a packet. I'll make sure that gets onto our website. And again, thank you, April, for your presentation, and thank everyone. And I hope everyone has a good day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.